Welcome back to another math video with Mrs. Hill. I'm going to show you today how to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators, also with negatives. So we're dealing with all different kinds of rational numbers now. Take a look at these examples, write them down, listen to the steps that I take, and make sure you take notes on that, and I'm going to give you some practice problems for you to try. Okay, our first example we have is negative 3/4 minus 1/3. Okay, step one, when you are adding and subtracting fractions, you need the denominators to be the same. When comparing fractions, it's really hard to compare them when you're talking about different pieces. Here we have fourths, here we have thirds. So if we convert them to equivalent fractions, we're not really changing anything. We're just rewriting them so that they'll have a common denominator and they're the exact same fraction. So a common denominator is a number that both 3 and 4 can divide into evenly. It's a common multiple for 3 and 4. And if you can come up with the least common multiple, you'll have the answer in simplest form. So 3 and 4 both go into 12. So 12 is going to be our common denominator. I'm going to rewrite this as one fraction with a sum on in the top and the numerator. So first I have to come up with an equivalent fraction. 4 times 3 is 12. So we're going to do 3 times 3, or in this case negative 3 times 3, to get negative 9. So all I really did is I'm writing 3/4 as 9/12. In this case, negative 9/12. Whatever I increase the bottom by, I increase the top by. So it's all proportional. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to ask myself, what would I multiply 3 by to get 12? And that would be 4. So whatever I do to the denominator, I'm going to keep this all proportional and do to the numerator. 1 times 4 is 4. Now I'm going to carefully copy down any operations. That was negative, and I'm subtracting a positive. Okay, now I can see that I have negative 9 minus 4. I'm going to rewrite that as negative 9 plus negative 4 and figure that out over a denominator of 12. So now I can see what I'm actually doing here with these integers. Am I going to add them or subtract them? In this case, I have two negatives, so I'm going to add them. And that will give me negative 13 over 12. If you end up with an improper fraction, you can divide it to turn it back into a mixed number. And I'm sure most of you can do that in your head by now. 12 goes into 13 one whole time with 1 remaining. So 1 and 1/12. And my answer was negative, so I'm going to put that negative sign in front of my overall answer. So my answer is negative 1 and 1/12. So look at the steps I took. First, I found a common denominator. Then I rewrote the numerators. In other words, I wrote an equivalent fraction with a common denominator. So I could have written it as 3/4 is 9/12, 1/3 is 4/12. Then I operated. I just followed the rules here with the integers, negative 9 plus negative 4. If you get an improper fraction at the end, turn it into a mixed number. If your fraction is not in simplest form, make sure you simplify it. And then finally, check your signs. We've been talking about this all along. Make sure you check your signs to see if they should be positive or negative. All right, let's try another one. Negative 4/15 minus a negative 9/10. Okay, they've got the negative 9/10 in parentheses just so we can read it clearly. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is find a common denominator for 15 and 10. I'm trying to find a common multiple, a number that both 15 and 10 go into or divide into, and that would be 30. They both divide into 30 evenly. Okay, so now I'm going to try to write an equivalent numerator. So 15 times 2 is 30. So I'm going to do 4 times 2, which is 8, and that's a negative. Bring down that minus sign and that negative over here. Okay, same thing over here. I'm going to change the tenths into 30ths by multiplying by 3, because 10 times 3 is 30, so 9 times 3 is 27. Okay, so I rewrote this with a common denominator of 30, and I increased my numerators proportionally. by multiplying by the same numbers. Whatever you do to the denominator, do to the numerator. So you have an equivalent fraction. Now I'm going to operate. I've got negative 8 minus a negative, so that really means I'm going to add a positive 27. If I rewrite it as addition, okay? Even though it says addition, I got a negative and a positive, so I'm going to be careful. I need to subtract those, find the difference between those two numbers. So that's going to give me positive 19 over 30. Okay, I think I'm finished, but I'm going to check my answer for 3 things. First of all, I'm going to make sure it's in simplest form. It is. Secondly, I'm going to make sure it's not an improper fraction. The top is bigger, is smaller than the bottom, so it's not an improper fraction. And lastly, I'm going to check my sign. Should it be negative? Well, when I added here, the bigger absolute value was positive, so my answer is positive. That is my final answer. So write that down. Make sure you go back and watch it again if you need to. Now I'm going to show you a couple of problems I want you to try on your own. Pause the video, unpause when you're finished, and we'll check them over together. All right, let's go over 3 of these, and then I'll save 2 to go over in class tomorrow. Let's go over 1, 2, and 3. Hopefully you have taken the time to pause the video and try these on your own. Let's take a look. Negative 2/3 plus negative 3/4. So the least common denominator, or the least common multiple for 3 and 4 is 12. Okay, so I'm going to write an equivalent fraction. 3 times 4 is 12. So 2 times 4 is 8. So this is negative 8. I'm not going to show all of my work now because these are problems hopefully you've already worked out. But if you're listening, I will tell you what I'm doing. So 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9. So that's negative 9. Bring down the addition sign. So that will give me negative 17 over 12, which is improper. So I'm going to change that into a mixed number. That will be 1 and 5/12, and it was negative. And I'm going to double check my sign. Yep, they were 2 negatives, so it's negative. I'm also going to make sure it's in simplest form. I can't divide 5 and 12 by anything else. So this is the answer you should have gotten. Negative 1 and 5/12. Okay, let's check number 2. Number 2, we have, we write it right here, 2/5 plus negative 3/4. Okay, common denominator for 4 and 5 is 20. 5 times 4 is 20, so 2 times 4 is 8. 4 times 5 is 20, so 3 times 5 is 15. And bring down the plus, and this was negative. Now I'm going to operate. I'm going to subtract these two because I have a positive and a negative. So that's negative 7/20. I'm going to check my answer for 3 things. Number 1, it's in simplest form. Can't divide these. Number 2, it is a proper fraction. It's not improper. And number 3, my sign. I have a negative, and yes, the bigger absolute value is negative, so negative 7/20 is the right answer. Let's check number 3, see how you did on that one. 2/8 plus negative 3/4. All right, so common denominator here is 8. So I don't need to change this one at all. Sometimes one of the denominators goes into the other evenly, and one of the denominators becomes our least common multiple. So I'm not going to change this. If I don't change the denominator, I don't need to change the numerator. 4 times 2 is 8, so 3 times 2 is 6, but that was a negative. So 2 plus negative 6 is negative 4/8. And now I'm going to do 3 things again. I'm going to check my sign. Bigger absolute value is negative. So my final answer is negative. It is a proper fraction, so I don't need to turn it back into a mixed number. But it's not simplified. So I can divide by 4, and I get negative 1/2. How'd you do on that one? All right, so tomorrow bring your notes, and we will go over these 2 examples, number 4 and 5. And we'll also learn how to add and subtract mixed numbers with integers and unlike denominators. And I'll see you then.